I hear people here, yeah, there are more. Yes.
I never know how long it's gonna take me. I would give myself a lot of time. I don't usually, not usually driving out, it's Friday late afternoon, so I didn't know. Guys. You're a tour reader.
Am I a tour reader? Not my son, I mean, I can read it.
No, I meant, are you our tour reader?
No,
Or-
definitely not.
I just didn't look at
Sandra. Or this is Lisa. Diane, Bonnie, Joey.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to begin in just a moment on page 214. Ashrei. One moment to grab their books and get ready.
The other C agreements, 226 or 558.
226 or 558 in the other Cedar. Joey. Okay. Ashrei Shavi Vitecha, Od Yelelucha Secha, Ashrei Am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Am Shekona Eluha, Tila V'David. Tila Tevnaida Perpi, Yiverech Basar Shem Kol Shel Yolam Va'ed, Anachnu Nivarech Yamitav Yadolam, Hallelujah, Uvad Tzihom V'Shavei Shel Yaakov, Yom Adonai. את הקדוש שתהילות ישראל, וקרא זה אל זה ויאמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, ולא פורץ כבודו. ותזהיני רוח, ושמע אחרי כל רעש גדול, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. Adonai Imloch le'olam va'ed. יפתחו לך ידי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני. Adonai chafetz le'man tzidko, yagdil Torah v'yadir, yikata v'yikata shemei haba, yamadira firutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayiko v'yamechon, v'chayiko beit Yisrael, v'akalav yizman karim, yimru amen, v'yishemei rabam v'barach, v'yalamu v'yalayha, v'barach v'yishtabach v'barit oram v'yaseh, V'yadarti tolei v'tolah, shemeita kudesha beri, v'leilanka berkata, v'shirata, v'jushbechata, v'nechmata, v'miram dilma v'imru, amen. Sandra, will you open the ark in just a moment, please? Okay, so we're going to open the ark in just a moment. We're on page 218 in Lav Shalom. V'ani tefilati lecha Adonai yitratzah, Elohim baruch chasecha. Anini be'emet yishecha. It's the little pulley on the right. There's like a pulley thing. Vayivin Zoharon vayom Moshe Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oyevecha v'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha Ki mitzir zitzei Torah v'var Adonai miYerushalayim V'rodok shatan Torah li'amo Yisrael v'kedushat levo. Gadlu l'Adonai hiti u'nurmema shemo yachdav L'chadonai v'yulav ya'kurav v'yater v'netzach v'chobot Joey, will you be my Gavai Shady, please?
Definitely.
Awesome. And Bob, I'm gonna ask you to step in if you can, only in, for the third Aliyah to call me to the Torah, please, because I'm taking to Israel. Hey, and can I give the first Aliyah, Bobby, can I give you an Aliyah? Okay, great. That's it.
Thank you, thank you.
You're gonna read that. We usually, for Minha, we usually place, we can turn around, you want to? Yeah, we can turn around, that's fine, here. Thank you, I'll just turn the screen too. Usually this- They're both traditions, they're both kosher, we usually read that way.
Microphone's there, so the Zoomers can hear me.
Exactly, and I'll touch this.
Shall we just like kind of turn the show on?
That's it.
Okay. All right, so we'll call up Bonnie for the first Aliyah. But now you can sweep the Torah and you're gonna be okay reading a little at an angle?
Oh, it's fine.
All right, so, let's sweep ourselves around the side.
I'm gonna tell them what the parka is.
Yeah, go for it.
Parshat Bahalotecha can be found on page 816 in the Chaim Chumash. If you're using another Chumash or Tanakh at home, you can turn to chapter 8 of Numbers.
ותגלה בטרם מלכותו עלינו בזמן קרוב יקום פליטתנו פליטת עמו בית ישראל ותנו חסר רחמים ורצון ונאמר אמן הכל הבו גודל והיינו תנו כבוד לתורה תעמוד חיה בת תלומה לעלייה ראשונה ברוכשת התורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו
אתם אבני לכם, חיים כלכם היום.
וזמן וכיוון אליכם חיים כולכם היום. Whenever you're ready.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMorach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Vaed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher בחר בנו מכל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה Adonai נותן התורה.
וידבר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל אהרון ואמרת אליו בקולתה את הנרות אל מול פני המנורה, ירו שבעה הנרות, ויעשכן אהרון אל מול פני המנורה, האלה נרתך, כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה. וזה מעשה המנורה משל זהב עד ריחה עד בכר משל כיהי כמראה. אשר הראה אדוני את משה כן עשה את המנורה.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Can I call you up for an Aliyah song? Yamod to Israel ben Avram Eliba Aliyah Hashniya. Stay here for just a moment.
Page 817, verse 5.
Before we move on, I was just taking a peek to see if there's Rachel. Hi Rachel, I see you there too. I want to take a moment to speak to Rachel and to Bonnie now for two reasons. One is that I wanted to offer you the honor of an Aliyah at the Torah so that we could honor you, Bonnie, for your presence at all of our minyanim this last while, and so that you could be literally close to Rachel on the screen here for a few moments. And two, because of the confluence of Sivan and the way that things work, we don't have an El Male spot today. We don't have a moment where we pause. We actually resume tomorrow on the calendar with that. And so I'm taking this moment to acknowledge that you have gone the extra mile and completed, as of today, will be completing 11 months of honoring Larry's memory with the cottage. It's even all 12, all 12. All 12, meaning that we've reached the first yard site. A world without Larry, and fittingly Poach Hall without Larry, if it's unthinkable to us as members of this community, we can't imagine the weight of the grief that sits with you day after day. Bonnie, over the course of this last year, you have talked so often with me about the appreciation for the very little things in life, squirrels especially, just little tiny things that you would sit with Larry and appreciate. Your entire life up until these last 12 months are cohortative stories, they're collective stories. It was you and Larry. And in that last year, it was you caring for Larry in a lot of respects and beyond that. And what I want to hold up for you in this moment is that you have also spent this last year with Larry, because you spent this last year with his memory wrapped around you for every service. It's not going anywhere. His memory isn't going anywhere, not from you and not from any of us. We care deeply about his memory in this community. We care about you. And so even on those times when Rachel isn't on the Zoom screen or sitting here with us on Shavuot or another time from San Diego, you have us. And we have you when you come and sit and read to our grade schoolers in the library. And I hope that you feel always that this community can be a comfort for you and a salve for you, even when we can't erase the grief from you. And we believe with our whole and full hearts that Larry's memory is for a blessing. Yehi Zifro Baruch. So with that, we're going to move on to the second aliyah, but I'll ask you to linger here for just a minute, okay? So Tom's going to take the aliyah, and Joey's going to tell us where we are.
We're on page 817, verse 5, very top. There you go.
Baruch hu et Adonai Baruch.
Baruch Adonai Olam
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olamai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher l'chavanu mikol ha'nim v'natamanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. וידבר אדוני משה לאמור, קח את הלוויים מיתות בני ישראל, ותכרת אותם, ותכרת אותם, וכל תעשה לכם, ותכרם הזה לכם מהעתד, והעבירו תער על כבשרם, וקיבצו בגדיהם, ותיחרו, ולקחו פר בבקר, ומנחתו סולת בלב השמן, ופר שני בבקר, תיקח לך תת וכתרתם את הלוויים לפני המועד, והכית את כל הדת בני ישראל, וישמחו בני ישראל ידיכם על הלוויים, והנה אחרון הלוויים תנופל לפני אדוני מאת ישראל, והיו לעבוד עבודת אדוני, והלוויים יסמכו את ידיהם על ראש פרים, ויעשה את אחד הטעם ואת אחד עולה לאדוני לכפר על הלוויים, והימלתה את הלוויים לפני האחרון ולפני בניו, והנחת אותם כתנופל אדוני, והטלת את הלוויים מכל בני ישראל, והיו לי והלוויים.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan banu torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Rav Chazan.
Amen. Chazan,
Et Zara,
et Azara,
Bat Ephraim, Ushmuela.
Bat Ephraim Ushmela, Alai Shlishi.
Page 818, verse 15.
Baruch Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Bayit. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Imatator et Levin lifnei Acharon lifnei Panav Kirata Otam Tidofal Adonai Velatata et Halvin Mitot Beneshoel Vahayu li Halvin V'Yacharein Yavo Halvin La'avad Atomawei V'Hitarta Otam Titav Otam Titazaki Natina Hema Liknot Beto Benishuel Chatan Tawada Tarahim Bekor Kol Nifnei Shuel Bilakal Tam Liklod B'nei Shuel Bechor B'nei Shuel Be'adam Likavanatam B'yom Hakoti Kol Bechor Ba'aretz Mitzrayim Stay Otam Eli Kahu Et Halim.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah v'nefchei olam tzavtocheinu. Baruch Atah Adonai noten
Um, I took an Ali out to the tour because tomorrow morning I leave for Israel, for Eretz Israel, for a mission for the week. So thank you to Bob for calling me up here. Appreciate that. Can I get a Bruisen bomb? Can I volunteer you to do Hagra? Would you really? Hagra? Maybe yeah. Yamad Hamad Via. Somebody want to do? Ryan, can I get you to do Glila? Fantastic. Okay, let me get you a chair. Hamad Hagul Haled.
Here, I've got it. What?
Oh, Bob was already in there. So let's turn the scroll back. Please rise for the lifting and wrapping of the scroll.
Torah Asher Moshe Livnei Yisrael al Piyat Adonai B'yad Moshe Yitzchayni Amachazikim Ha'avethon Ha'merusha Yitzchayni Amachazikim Ha'avethon Ha'merusha
We're going to continue now. We're turning the tour to the Ark. Sandra, would you open our
Yes,
please?
I'm on my way.
Thank you. Making you get your steps in.
I know, right?
We're on page 221 in Lev Shalem.
Yavelu et Shema Tumna, Yitzchak Shemo Levado, Odot Eretz Yisrael, Yivayin Le'avot, Le'avot, Yisrael, Hallelujah, V'David Mizmor. Move you for your march.
Hashivinu Adonai lecha v'nashuva chadishamenu v'keten. As the ark is closed, I'll just mention that one of my favorite things about exploring a parsha is finding pieces of liturgy in the parsha that were lifted out of the parsha and then put somewhere else. So when we get into the Ha'alotecha, we take a look in our Humashim, which we'll use for learning today, you'll find that Vayehi bin Soah Ha'aron comes from Parshat Ha'alotecha. We are now on page 222 for Chati Kaddish. Immediately following Chati Kaddish, we go into our whispered private Amidah. Yikadav yikadash mirabah, yamati rav yirtei v'yamlik malkutei b'chayikon v'yamechonukei d'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agalav v'zman karivim ruham v'barhak v'shabbat v'par v'joah v'nasei v'todar v'salei v'talav shmei d'kodesha v'ri'uleva v'kol berchata v'shirata v'shbechata v'nechmata d'amiram v'alma v'yamruham Having yet completed your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. Repetition of the Amidah begins on page 223 in Lev Shalem. When I get to page 225, with the Kedusha, please join me, and when we reach Ha'el HaKadosh, please be seated. Again, we're on 223. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Yisrael Elohei Rivka Elohei Yaakov Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor VaNorah Elyon, Komel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol, Zocher Chasdei Avot Mevigo Heliv Nevnei and the Manshlo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer Fokei Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magid Abraham Fokei Tzara, atah Gibor Le'lo Adonai Mechayim Mitzim atah, Rav Le'Oshiach, Mechalkei Chayim B'Chesed, Mechayim Mitzim V'Rachamim Rabim, Samet Novelim V'Rofech Olim Matir Asurim, Mekayim Munato Tishnei Hafar, Mi Chamocha Bal Giborot, Umbi Tomel Nachmalech Mitum Chayim Atziach Teshuvar, Ne'eman atah L'chayot Mitim, Baruch atah Adonai L'chayei HaMitim.
Amen. Nekadosh Mokishim Shema Kitchem Adosh Ma'akadom Me'ot.
קדש 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 לא יצבע מלאכס כבודה. ברוך אדוני ממקומו. ימלך אדוני לעולם הציון לדור ודור, הללויה.
נצח יקדשותך נפתיש בשבחך כי לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש אתה אחד בשמך אחד מקמך ישראל גוי אחד בארץ תפארת גדולה עטר תשועה יום נבחר תשב מבחנתו אברהם יגל יצחק קרמן יעקב ארנב ינוחו מנוחת אהבה רבה מנוחת אמת אמונה מנוחת שלום ושלווה ושקט וביתה מנוחה שלמה שאתה רוצה בה יכירו בניך וידעו כי בחיים מנוחתם ומנוחתם יקדישו את שמך אלוהים לדורותינו בצדק מנוחתנו קדשנו במצוותיך ותמחקנו בתורתך וזרענו לטובך ושמחנו בשורתך ותאר ליבנו לעבדך האמת ונחילנו לאלוהינו יעבור רצון שבת קודשך ינוחו בה ישראל מקדשי שמך ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת ונשאי אדוני ליום ישראל בתפילתם ושבתו גל לפרעתך ותפילתם יבואתך בה ברצון ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך ותחזינה עינינו בשובך וציון ברחמים ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון תימנח לך הטוב כי לא חלרח עמך במלכים כי לא תעמוך שדך מעולם גילינו לך יד כולם יברך את שמם שמך מלכים תמיד לעולם ועד לכל החיים ידעו סלע יללו את שמך באמת האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך ולפני לכותו שלום רב על ישראל עמך ולכל ישבי תבל תשים לעולם יתהו מלך אדום לכל השלום וטוב בעיניך וברך את עמך ישראל לכל עת תוכל שלום בשלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. Kadisha Lamb is on page 230. יתקדש יקדש לרבה, אמרתי רק ותגים לי כל דתי בתי יכולים ומפונותי לכל בית ישראל בגליו בזמן קריבים רועמים. ישבי רבה וקרוב אליו ומאירה, יתברך וישבח ויפאר ושומע ויתעשה ויתודה ויתעלה ויתעלה, שמי תקודשה בריחי כל הדתה ושירתה. שישבחתה ונחמתה דמירם ימדים רועמים. תתקבע צלודות לבוא ישראל, ורבה בון ישמעיה עם רועמים. יש לומר רבה מן שמעיה, לחיים עלינו ולכל ישראל במרועמים. ועשה שלום ורמבו יעשה שלום עלינו, ולכל ישראל במרועמים. עלינו לשבח אדון הכל. הרגצי בתורתך אדוני מלכי למעט ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ היום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. Warner's Kaddish is found on page 232.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה ויעמד וירב וירצה וימליך מלכותי וחייכון ובימיכון וחיי תכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב אמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם לעמיה. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי תקדשה בריחו
Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran b'alma v'imru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom miromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen.
Yeshar Koach, Zaveri for leading Torah. Right now, we're going to take a break in our services and before our learning so we can get a little nourishment. Here we have food in total, and we'll join back together at about 8:05 for some learning together. And we are going to use the Chumashim, so if you want to hang on to them or grab it again, you're welcome to do that.
Thank you.
Hi, Rachel. Rachel's waving at us.
Hi, thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov.
And your name came up.
Oh, I hope so. I'm a evil refugee.
Believe me, they take it very tough and they're very bitter.
They can be kidding.
Kidding.
Actually,
They feel rejected. They should.
Deborah Singer Friends was
They would have
talking.
come in numbers in the pandemic. Literally had 18 years setting up chairs. So they remember me every move that they're gonna set up.
So anyway, I was gonna tell you, Deborah Singer Friends was talking about your very gorgeous and Deborah.
Oh, yeah.
And that was her topic.
He's in the run-up.
Yes, I understand. We supported everything.
Oh, good. Well, Sam helped me.
Yeah.
You wanted to know why we don't do tzikah?
Yes.
Maybe Marcella is Sivan 13 tonight, so we were doing tzikah
That's interesting, so we're doing halftime on Thursday.
Wait, hang on. We returned on Thursday to.
Well, so my understanding
Yeah.
is, depends where everything goes. If you haven't started saying top, you start saying on the 13th.
Right, exactly.
But some people start the day after. We started,
Many people were positive.
that, well, not the day after, the
They
after
don't walk
Easter.
out, they crushed it.
So.
Well, I wasn't here. I didn't start saying top, so I didn't do tzikah. For sure tomorrow. For sure tomorrow we do top noon, even we did, because I'm not doing top noon and I was leading, I didn't do tzikah, neither did I do the Amalei. Hopefully I didn't short anybody.
So it helps me to campaign. And they found it 30 years after.
I think we did do no representative in the first day.
It's growing by leaps and bounds.
So much freaking
I didn't think versus somebody
So much
who I
freaking
never
pizza
met,
tonight.
who worked for Sheila Fuel, tried to take their responsibility
It's
for
like
me.
you're 92 days a year when you don't say top.
I'll take an organizer like that.
Right, it's like why. My dear teacher,
Do I have?
I love it. My teacher got like Daniel. He used to say, "Oh, friend, and he would say it just like, he was like, "Oh, come back to our friend, Tafnun." He's a Rosh Hashiva in Israel, but like has not. He must be from Westchester or something. It's very close. I wouldn't start my friend Tafnun was that. So
It's amazing.
Dennis.
Like I did some things on Monday.
Making it official tomorrow. They've been married legally.
They
never had a couple.
Doing that, and how long?
No, just like people maybe.
She's good.
or like right after like when you get out of Nissan, it's like the
Payment from.
that Saturday afternoon. I don't even
Her brother, her sister's husband just passed
exactly. I
away.
don't even
Her
plan to
family's
teach
very small.
if I'm the one on. So it's that next Saturday afternoon because there's so many Mollies and stories. So you were planning on having pizza today?
I'm gonna do Rosanna.
I don't know.
Invited a lot of people, like
At first it would be amazing.
her sister, her friends, I don't know.
What happens a lot on Saturdays, things.
That's her.
Unless we plan something, things sort of, apart from these, she's a
We're both in Israel with President Cruz, so she's going a week from Monday.
For the whole summer again?
She went for 3 weeks for the Conservative Yeshiva, but she's going, she'll be arriving 5 days before it starts.
Okay.
So she'll be there almost a month.
My favorite was this
I'll be there.
named Susie and Mitch.
Are you going to learn also?
They're sort of
Are you going to learn?
a you guys kind of couple on the other, like a parallel universe on the other coast. They've got but with older children, all their kids are married. At this point, but they're very shul involved, and their kids went on big shul presidents where they are, and there was this amazing couple, Mitch actually just passed away. It was heartbreaking that he passed away. And huge Grateful Dead fan. And every Saturday night when I was out there as a tutorial intern,
Dead and Company or today?
was that?
Dead and Company or today? Sorry.
Yeah.
At the, go ahead.
Yeah. And Mitch and Susie would, every single Saturday night, they would take me, if I was out there, I was sort of beholden to their movie plans. I was to go with them to the movie theater, but then we go see a movie, and then they insisted on going to the diner afterwards. It's New Jersey. So we went to the diner afterwards, and we eat. And this continued into June. So this night we went to see movies that started at 9:30, and then we were at the diner afterwards. I'm falling asleep. I slept through half these movies. Yeah, and they had their regular order. The diner had it ready every single week.
I mark one of our kids, and grandchildren coming in.
How is it
Go to
not to
bed
do
at
my
like
eyes?
7.
Yes.
And I'm tempted to do that. Of course, you get
Tempted to what?
to do that
To
also.
crawl in the, when my kids
And
are
we
bed
also
at
get at 5:30.
exactly. My kids do too, and so when I put them to bed and I crawl into bed with them to go to sleep at time, I just went to bed. No, it'll be great. I'm so tired.
I'm usually pretty good, because I don't do it, and all I do is read. Although today was sort of, I'm reading Sartre, so I'm sort of reading all this stuff. Although it's actually, I'm starting getting.
Yeah, I mean, Sartre's a little.
Well, this is Age of Reason, it's really good.
Age of Reason is awesome.
It's awesome.
But I've only ever read it as an assigned reading, so.
That's, I actually, it's funny, because I've been reading, I read Camus 3 years ago, so I read
Is this from the Bagel Factory?
to
Everything, is everything from the Bagel Factory? Do you know?
Yes, it is, all from the Bagel
Right. That's okay, you know. Then I use like Bagel Factory bagel, it must be from the whole brand. I'm wondering if this is catered from the Bagel Factory of Cadillac? Do you know if it's Bagel Factory of Cadillac?
As far as I know, that's usually.
Is that where it usually comes from?
For surprise.
Okay, taste it. Fruit check. For water. Bagels don't taste like yeah, Bagel Factory. That's why. They don't taste fresh. Oh, nice, they're not from today.
Hi, Joel. I'm Lisa. We've met many times at Santa's house for dinner.
Yes,
Just remind you.
I remembered you, but I didn't remember your name.
Lisa,
So thank you.
Liza.
Okay. How are you?
Thanks for asking. Well, sadly, this isn't the club I wanted to belong to right now. So,
Which club?
the city of the Minha
Oh,
club.
the Minha Club, okay.
Yeah, my mom passed away.
Oh, yeah. My friend's mom. She was 94, so.
Doesn't matter how old they are, though, it's just the same, loss.
Same loss, but you feel she lived a very full life.
Yeah.
Lisa missed
To
John's
justify
wedding.
that.
That was a big deal. She missed the wedding.
It was the day of the
We had a
wedding.
good person.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, my.
It was in Canada.
Sorry to say, but
Yes.
More than one after wedding.
They're big.
Here you go. Now, here.
Bunch of people.
Steve was good, they had a good crowd?
No. A lot of people canceled COVID.
Oh, yeah, there were a couple people, I know Judy and Frank.
Talking about for
were
what?
very concerned about COVID.
Fran and I went on the Stiebel Minion Shavuot retreat at Brandeis Bardeen,
Oh,
which
okay.
was gorgeous. But a number of people canceled one at the last minute, but they had COVID.
Because they had COVID, yeah.
Well, COVID's running right good.
It's on the
Yeah.
mind,
It's a bummer.
But I mean,
There was a person at Carl, she was 25, she got really sick, one day after school. That's scary.
And you guys are early in the morning. I forgot a mask. Do you usually wear a mask?
No, I mean,
Well, we got new variants that are surging in and out doing that.
I have one on me, but
I was careful, no balls.
You know,
Take the Chinese,
like some people kind of think COVID's over, but it's not. And
I look at it this way, it's like a plane crash every day. There's a plane crashing in the US every day.
listening more.
300 people dead. So we did. Now, to me, that beats doubtful, I get it. And I see the infections and how it home testing, they don't really know anything. People still don't understand. It speaks to the lack of comedy.
Doctor said that I think was someone on the legal side got sick from the wedding.
Lack of. These parents.
Nobody else, so other than that.
Do the appeals and.
I can only test positive for June. Tuesday, probably 6 days. And we also have speed test.
we're going to Israel.
So do people let anyone not come because they tested in the last?
It's interesting, they just changed the rule.
Well, there's okay now.
My brother just got
My
it.
brother just
I was worried about her making it. Did she get there?
She, her policy is.
The United States has also changed its policy about requiring a test, which may be great for tourism and obviously, about getting onto a plane.
She was okay. Oh, yeah.
What about all the people on the
I
plane?
would prefer if everybody had tests.
Or at least we're masked, and that's an optional now too.
No,
Be so vigilant.
give it up. So instead of.
Tyrants be so vigilant?
It's tyranny.
Yeah, the airlines are making.
Yeah, oh, just the pain.
Do
Yeah, they totally.
Is it the arm, is it her,
I
the
also
side,
think
that's your dominant side as
It's
well?
really taxing flight attendants who have to enforce.
She's using the cane.
And
Well, they got a good military president, sir. Bill, though.
But it
That is
has been
such bad luck.
terrible having to enforce with all
Getting
the
it like that.
acts of aggression.
Anybody want some cake?
Put down anyway.
Oh, you did? I did too. Okay. Are we time, the time?
Person I was talking about who got sick, who's
For the next
very
thing?
low. She had medical personnel there. I didn't know her pills weren't available.
What time is Shabbos over?
In fact, it was amazing to get them.
Really?
COVID pills,
Any
yeah.
idea?
You have to
Not
have,
enough of them, so that you have to be older, because, yes, you're young, you know.
unless you have a health condition.
Yeah,
What are we doing right
or you're a
now?
medical
Waiting
person,
for,
on the family, you get it,
Yeah.
which I do.
Yeah.
I never got it, and I don't want it.
Amen, brother.
As I think about it, I think that I bet you that DC kids know the Wayner's DC kids, like I was talking about.
Well, they don't, you know, Benji, unfortunately, they belong to the DC Minha, they don't belong to, so if they go.
No, I think that they go to DC.
If they go to the DC Minha, Benji knows them.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it is, because Rachel has had, I don't know where she is now, the Susie's daughter Rachel, and I don't remember her married last name, or if she kept it, but she had a clerkship in DC for a couple of years, and I'm pretty sure they were.
What's her last name?
Person on the school committee is head of the administration.
It's a nice thing if you're in this, we just roll out of bed. Roll that.
All right. Well, even Gary is having some nourishment. It's nice to see you, Gary. It's good to see your face. We're all having a little nosh. Please continue eating and enjoying yourselves. I'm gonna send some papers around, but we're not actually starting on the source sheets. We're gonna start in the Chumash in a moment.
Stand up.
I'll send some around this way.
Sandra, your sandals look really good.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I think we'll all like.
My friend Annalisa, I'm so listening.
I met you, and it's so nice to see you, and please forgive me for not saying
So, we are going to study some sources from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, even though we're currently exploring during the Parsha cycle. We're in Bamidbar, in Bahalotecha, as we read earlier. We're not sticking with the exact Parsha for our Parsha notes, because Deuteronomy means what? What's Deuteronomy translate as?
Devarim.
Devarim into Hebrew, and then into English? Deuteronomy means a second telling. It's actually a repeat. Yeah. So, but we kind of know that, right? We know a couple of things. First of all, internal to the Jewish canon, we have a history of the finding of a book of the Torah, and it's very likely that that Torah itself that is being referred to is Deuteronomy itself, which is a retelling. That's a little bit of critical text theory. And that retelling sometimes makes very interesting references back to Parsha stuff that we've been studying here in Bamidbar. So I want us to look at something from the Parsha, and then look at the relationship of that piece from where it's located in Bamidbar, in the fourth book of the Torah, and see what relationship it seems each of the rabbinic masters who had something to say about a line in a later book that's referring to that thing way back in the previous book later. So we're going to try to create that bridge across the two books. So what we're going to look at briefly in the Chumash, in the Tanakh, is from the 11th chapter of Numbers, of Bamidbar. It's on page 827 if you're looking in Eitz Chaim. And it's the second Vayehi in a row. The first Vayehi in this little chunk of the Ha'alotecha, remembering that the chapter numberings are Christian additions later, or perhaps telling you for the first time. For some of you, that is a Deuteronomy. Appreciate the giggles, okay. Here on page 826, if we glance backwards, the first Vayihi is Vayihi Soa Ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe. Right, as I referenced, this is the piece where we get the liturgy that each time the traveling sacraments were lifted up, Moshe would announce, Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha, like rise up, God, and scatter your enemies, v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha, and may your haters get out from before your face. More or less. That's the more literal translation. Okay? And then we get to the second Vayihi. The people took to complaining bitterly before the Lord. Now you know that we're talking about Jews. Okay? The Lord heard and was incensed. And so what did God do? God sent a fire. So a fire of the Lord broke out against them, ravaging the outskirts of the camp. The people cried out to Moses. Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. That place was named Tav-erah because a fire of the Lord had broken out against them. It's a play on words in the Hebrew. The riffraff in their midst felt a gluttonous craving. And then the Israelites wept and said, if only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish that we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers. Why are they so excited about cucumbers? I know that's also a guess. All these things are guesses in translation because we're establishing what these vegetables are based on, in a lot of times, hapax legomenot, right? Like the first and only mention of those things in ancient text. And so probably cucumbers, sure. We miss the meat, we miss the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Yeah. Now our gullets are shrunken, they're shriveled. There is nothing at all, nothing but this manna to look to. And then the narrative voice of the text comes in. I really like this because it's kind of it's telling us what happened with Moses and God. Then it gives us a quote from the people, and then the narrative voice of the text says, the Haman, by the way, not Haman, boo, but like the Haman and the manna, okay, and the manna, he's ragadu. By the way, says the text, the manna was like coriander seed, okay? And its color was like this bidolach, this like very special spiced color. The people would go about and gather it, grind it between millstones, or pound it in a mortar, boil it in a pot, and make it into the cakes. It tasted like rich cream. Kita'am l'shad hashamen. When the dew fell on the camp at night, the manna would fall upon it. Okay, so the people complained, God got mad, sent a fire. Moshe was like, whoa, hold back. The fire stops, and then the people go immediately back to complaining. I miss the meat, I miss the cucumbers, I miss the onions, I miss the garlic. And then, by the way, we hear that the manna that's falling should be very satisfying, right? It should be pretty good. Okay, so this is the account in our parsha of the experience of manna, and also kind of the social interaction of the people of Moshe, of God, when it comes to the manna itself. Now, in Devarim, when we're recounting this idea, we get to talking about Jews complaining about their feet, which resonates deeply with me. So I kind of went deep into this parsha. And one of the things that gets explored across all of the different sources in text, we're going to turn to the source sheet in just a moment, is this idea that there must be an explanation for the idea that the clothes that the Israelites wore didn't wear out and their feet didn't swell up. And we're going to hear that it wasn't just their feet that didn't swell up, but something else seemed to be protected on their feet. And I want you to have in the back of your mind that we have a tension at play here, which is you've got the people's account, which is, oh, Lanu, like this is terrible. We remember what life was like under the Egyptian rule. And you have the narrative voice of the text, which says what?
This is pretty good.
It's pretty good. Fran says it's pretty good. Like it's pretty great, you know. But then again, God's probably the narrative, right? The narrator, whoever they are, is putting in the voice of God, who sees it as pretty good, or a big fan of God, right? So you've got God saying this, or we're a very big fan of God. Okay, so we're gonna play with this tension of the idea of somebody who is voicing God as the gift of maintaining clothing and also footwear or feet versus the complaining Jews. So we're gonna look at Devarim for a second. And just because of the setup in the room and COVID and all the things, I'm gonna read some of the text, but I'll invite input as we go back and forth. So, sim latcha lo balata me'alecha. Your simla, which is like your vestment, we're gonna get to that in a second, did not wear out from upon you. Viraglecha, which is, we're gonna read as feet, okay? Because what's foot in modern Hebrew? Regel, okay? But also we have kaf regel, which could be more specific, because what could regel also be? A leg. What could it also be? A chag, right? A regel is also, yeah, regalim. We have also the because it's a pilgrimage. Regel has all these different meanings. From the context, we know that it means probably feet, but I want to be clear here that it's important to understand the vocabulary context. And there's also something else that I want you to understand, okay? It's really critical historically to get this. When this verse says, simla techa, your simla didn't wear out, what one has to understand is that most people in the ancient world contemporary to the original times of the Torah, and going forward for many centuries, so I'm not an expert on this area of history, so I can't tell you exactly when this shifted. In the Near Eastern traditions, people had one garment. They owned a singular garment. And that garment, the easiest way to make a garment, by the way, is to take one long sheet, right? One singular picture of I'm actually gonna do this, that's why I brought this up here again. I'll do it in front of the camera so you can see it too, right? So you wind up with one long sheet, and then when you fold it in half, you wind up with a place to put a hole in the middle top, which becomes the place for your head, and then you can sew up the sides. And by the way, how many corners does that garment have?
4.
There you go. Okay, so this is the origin of, and you should place the fringes on the 4 corners of the garment, but also you've got to understand people had one garment. So the miracle of people having this garment that, wait, before I say it, someone else explain it in your words. What is the miracle here that their garments didn't wear out? What are the different ways that could take shape? Why is it miraculous that their garment didn't wear out?
No shopping malls in the desert, they couldn't have gotten other clothes.
Right, they couldn't have gotten other clothes, possibly. We're gonna see an argument against that, which is interesting. But yes, you probably, where are they getting other clothing? One thing. Good, what else?
Also, people grow, is there the children's
Thank you. Absolutely, Tom says children grow, hopefully, right? Children grow, so how is it possible that the garment that fits, literally my kids outgrew the clothing I bought them 2 weeks ago, okay? They're almost 4 and almost 7, and they're going through sizes week by week. So how are these garments not wearing out from upon them in this regard? So those are the miracles, or naming the miracles. Now, we're gonna take a look at Siftei Chachamim, at this midrashic commentary that pulls together a Rashi and also a Re'em. So, you might ask, they say, that's my favorite, and you might inquire about this. It says in Parshat Ki Tavo, that is neither our Parsha of the week, nor is it here where we're looking in Devarim. Rather, it's somewhere else. There's another quote that says, B'na'alecha, also your sandal wear, your footwear also didn't shred away from your foot. Okay, so very similar to the whole, your feet didn't wear out. Also, your footwear apparently didn't wear out, which implies that they wore shoes. Okay, so the first comment is, what's the question? What's the first comment or question here? Why are they bringing up that another place that says they wore shoes? What's bugging them? What's bugging this commentator?
It's not parallel, that it's clothes and feet instead of clothes and shoes.
There you go. So it's not parallel, first of all. Here we have clothes, your clothes didn't wear out and your feet, and the other place you have clothes and sandals. And also, if it says that your feet didn't wear out, it seems to imply that perhaps they were barefoot, right? As many people were in Near Eastern and still are in societies that haven't come to adopt footwear fully, or have the means to provide footwear as people's feet grow and have those resources. So what was it? Which was it? Were they barefoot or were they not barefoot? Are both things true? Is one of the things true? Which source is true? So the answer is that verse there refers to the Jews who left Egypt who had shoes. Okay, I like this answer because it's like, some people have shoes, some people don't have shoes. Those shoes didn't shred. So Rashi's explanation here refers to the Jews who were born in the wilderness who did not have shoes. What does that mean?
There wasn't a mall.
There wasn't a mall, says Fran. That is correct. Neither did they have one of those nifty Amazon boxes where you could order and then go pick up even if you don't have an address, right? The issue here the issue here is that they couldn't have picked up something along the way. And if you're born into the generation in the desert, it's very interesting. I spent a lot of time thinking about the generation that was born into the desert, but never about the practicalities of that, right? Like, where are they getting baby blankets and the material for that, and sandals and clothing? Herb has a...
They took the gold and the silver from the Egyptians. You'd think they'd pick up a couple wardrobe items too while they were at it.
Herb, Baruch Shekivanta, Herb is thinking, as we're going to see in another commentary, didn't they take a haul from Egypt, some of them? Okay, so we're going to get there. Maybe they had that, but in this commentary, they said, listen, the simplest explanation, right? Simplest explanation is there were people who had, either there were people who had shoes and people who didn't, or we're talking about the people who left Egypt had footwear, and then the generation born into the wilderness, they don't have footwear with them, right? Because they're born into the wilderness, there's no mall, says Fran. Okay. So, and then we're going to go just a little bit further. So we get this other explanation from the Re'em. This usually happens to only those who walk barefoot, meaning the explanation in the verse above is your regel didn't vatseka. I'm going to leave that without going deeply into the translation because we're going to see a cool source in a moment. But what they're saying is, in our verse here in Devarim, it's talking about something that usually happens to people when they were barefoot. This isn't really a description of something that happens to people who are wearing footwear. People with footwear don't have the thing that the verse says people didn't get. It wouldn't be a problem for them. So, shouldn't you ask, what's the significance of nor did your foot swell? We're going to stop at that question and we're going to go to the next commentary, which is Ramban, who is actually going to give us one of the Ibn Ezra commentaries that I bring to you in full on the next page. Okay, so we're going to go to Nachmanides, Ramban. Okay, and your raiment. I love raiment. I'm going to tell you why I love that weird translation. What he's getting at there is, it's like in Spanish saying like vestido. There's a general word for your vestment, your garment, right? It's the one thing that you have, and then you go and you wash and then you wear it again. Okay, so that's what that raiment business is in English. Okay, so this is what Nachmanides theorizes. Now we're going to get into not questioning. Instead, we get to a little pseudo-magical explanation. Here's what's really happening from God. The clouds of glory, the Ananei Kavod, Hayu, what were they doing? They were brushing the garments and pressed them so that they looked like freshly ironed articles. It was like heavenly Febreze. Okay? That's not what he said, I'm just adding my own commentary. And so it was with their children. As they grew, their garments grew with them. Okay, so Ramban says, that's the magic. It was constantly being like fresh pressed, and also the garments were growing with them. So this is what Rashi's language is. He says, I'm bringing this from Rashi, and also these are the words of the Agadah, meaning these are the words of the story-like explanations that get collected in the rabbinic works. But Ibn Ezra wrote, other scholars say, going to what Herb said, they just took a lot of garments out of Egypt. And it's possible that it was not in the nature of manna. Oh wait, now he's going to go into magical thinking also. It's possible that it was not in the nature of manna to produce perspiration. They didn't sweat. Manna didn't make them sweat, right? You might miss meat, my friends, but you don't miss the meat sweats, right? And so he's saying the manna doesn't produce sweat in them, and therefore their garments lasted longer. And so also he said, neither did your feet swell, meaning God gave them strength, or he led them, what was the word in Hebrew here? I'm going back and forth because I want to move quickly. I think ba'et or something like that. He moved them really slowly. What does that mean? How does that help if God moved them slowly?
Oh,
So slow that
their feet are gonna be fine.
the feet are fine. They're not sweating. It's a leisurely walk all through the meat bar. I love that this is like the explanation for 40 years in the wilderness, right? Oh, it's gonna take us 40 years, so you shouldn't sweat, right? Your feet shouldn't hurt, right? I like this explanation so much because it's this desire to marry all of the textual narrative together, right? And then Ramban says, but Ibn Ezra's wrong. His words aren't correct, okay? Because Moshe mentions this to them in order to say that upon observing the commandment of God, they're going to have mazon, and also they're going to have this special garment, and they're going to renew their strength, even as they lived by the manna 40 years and they had garments. What is Ramban's problem? Why does he not like Ibn Ezra's explanation? Or rather, what does it seem? This is very Socratic of me because I do have an idea in mind, but I'm willing to accept other comments. Yeah, you have an idea?
The fact that that their shoes and clothes didn't wear out is because they made a mitzvah. So that's the reward of the mitzvah.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with the clouds or the moisture or whatever. It's just the reward of the mitzvah.
Right. So Vered says, look, what Ramban is saying here is that Ibn Ezra can't be correct that it was simply granted, because the point was that their garments were not worn out and their feet didn't swell as a reward. There had to be a reward aspect to it from his perspective, not from any of these other perspectives. You can see there's a real disagreement in the sources here. Some of our sources over time say, no, this is what happened in the desert, right? Magical Febreze Ananei Hakavod. And this is and the garments that grew with the children. But for Nachmanides, part of his theological approach here is no, it must come by means of reward. Turn the page. Go to the second Ibn Ezra. Second Ibn Ezra is going to explain a little bit more about it. It's going to bring together a couple of the other commentaries, and then we're going to quickly go to Shnei Luchot Abrit and we'll end. So Ibn Ezra says, I want to dig into this word from our, if you flip back to the first page, Vatseka, right? So he's looking at that one particular word, and he says, what it means here is, it's related to baking, to the word batsik, which is dough. And they baked the dough, because this is the same word that's used way back in Shemot in Exodus for the dough. And so he says it must be referring to, it's actually a fantastic visual, right? Like the baked dough, like doughy rising swollen feet. He says it is usual for the feet of a wayfarer who walks great distances to get doughy, right? To get swollen in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, Ibn Ezra says, it's possible that God gave the Israelites strength or that he led them slowly. So this is the commentary that Ramban doesn't like so much. But what you see here is that Ibn Ezra says that if this word was used deliberately in the text, then maybe it's there to say it's not about reward and punishment. It's simply what was granted, and it was the status quo for all Israelites who were wandering in the desert, that they were granted this miracle. That the miracle of manna wasn't just that it tasted like whatever they wanted it to taste like, but also that it wouldn't ruin their clothing grew with them, etc. Every commentator needs to understand this a little differently, because the story of the manna defies logic. It defies logic. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that they possibly could have taken enough garments and shoes to provide for the thousands and thousands who were born in the wilderness, and for the Erev Rav that came with, for the mixed multitude that comes with them. It doesn't make sense that magically wandering in the desert, one doesn't shred shoes after walking thousands of miles. So, the Hasidic commentary, in the form of the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, doesn't even try to see a miracle in the garments or a miracle in the shoes. It sees it as something completely different. They say that, I'm gonna actually give you a rephrase rather than read word for word. That the idea here is that the garment that's being referred to, that's not being worn out. Remember that the verse that we got was, your garment, your vestment, will not wear out from upon you. He says, you know what we know a garment to be? Our garment is our body. And what is it a garment for? It's a garment for our soul. So what was God saying in this verse? That your bodies won't give out on you and they'll house your souls. No, not soles of feet. That's kind of a funny play on words in English. They'll house your souls, and they won't wear out from upon you, but rather they're going to last you in the desert and the wilderness. And what I love about this explanation is that it simultaneously eschews all of the magical thinking used by everyone who's trying to explain logic in all other generations, and at the same time employs the idea that what the Torah is trying to tell us here is that people themselves were magically preserved. Doesn't matter if it was reward or it was not reward-based, but rather a verse is coming to tell us here in the desert, whatever is happening to you, you are going to be preserved as a person, and your body will too. For a very last point, I'm going to go back to our Parsha, to Bamidbar, not on our sheet. This is why I then read back into Bamidbar the outrage of God at the Israelites' complaint. Because if you look back at the narrative, and you think about the idea that the Israelites are in a situation, having been led out of bondage, they've been led out of slavery by God. Now they're in a wilderness, and they're fully reliant upon miracles at the hands of a heavenly being in order to survive. And basically, if we're reading back into it, this idea from the Shnei Luchot HaBrit, that God is protecting these vessels and doing whatever God can, because it's going to take a miracle for their feet to survive, for their bodies to survive, for them to have the nourishment they need, for them to have the garments they need for the generation that's born there. And what do they say? We miss our meat, we miss our cucumbers, we miss our onion, we miss our garlic. And I hear the Shnei Luchot great speaking back to those Israelites in that generation and thinking about that psalm that we read, Psalm 95 at the beginning of Kabbalat Shabbat, Arba'im Shana Akut Badur, that wicked generation that wandered for 40 years in the desert. It was like, the problem was they couldn't see the miracle, right? And the gratitude that ought to have been there for simply having survived. Where I want to end is to say, what I appreciate about our text always is the preservation of even the stains and the ugly spots of who the Israelites were. Our text doesn't try to make our people out to be a non-complaining and perfect people, so we can see ourselves in the text, right? I mean, I joke about it as I go through here, but it's on purpose, because we do complain when our feet swell, and we do complain when food doesn't taste the way that we want it to taste. But what the commentaries are striving to do throughout history is to come back to us as we read this text through the generations and say to us, take a look at the issue though that's going on in the text. See the missed appreciation and the missed opportunities for appreciation. And then we can look back even all the way, a whole book prior to Devarim. We're still in the Midbar, we're gonna eventually get to Devarim, and we can see that there just wasn't appreciation for whatever miracle was taking place in the wilderness. So with that, we're going to end our learning for today, and we're going to, I'm going to invite somebody who ate bread to lead us in, Joey's already volunteering, to lead us in Shir Hamalot and the Zimun, which you can find on page 47 in the books in front of you. Joey is going to lead us in the Zimun, and then we'll go into the first blessing and finish privately, and then we'll go into Ma'ariv on the brink.
Shir Hamalot Peshuv Adonai Shivati Yonainu Kecholim Az Yamalei Sefovim Ushoneinu Rina Az Yomeru Vagoi Igdil Adonai Lasoti Melech Igdil Adonai Lasoti Manu Ainu Semeti Shuva Adonai Et Shaviteinu Ka'akikim ba'negem Azorim bedima Beri na'itoru Halkele tuvacho No se meshech hazara Bo yavo berina No se alumota Tehilat Adonai Yedaber Pi Bivarech Kovas Archikushalo Lamba'ed Va'anachnu nivarech Yah Me'asach Yadalam Hallelujah Odil Adonai Ki Tov Ki Le'olam Chasdov Mi'amal El Yavuras Adonai Yashmi'ah Kol Tehilato Chavirai Nevarech Yehi Shem Adonai Baruch Men Tavi Adolam Birshut Chavirai Nevarech Elohim Shechal Mishelo Baruch Elohim Shechal Mishelo Suvo Chayinu Baruch Uvarich Shemo Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Hazan et Haolam Kulo V'Tuvo Mechim V'Chesed U'Rachamim Unoten Lechem L'chol Basar Ki Le'olam Chatzov U'Tuvo HaGadol Tami L'Chasar Lanu Ve'Chasar Lanu Ma'azon Le'olam Ba'en Ba'ur Shemo HaGadol Ki L'Zan Parnes L'Akol U'Metiv L'Akol U'Metiv Ma'azon L'Chol V'Riyotav Asher Bara Baruch Atah Adonai Hazan et Hakol
264.
Just a moment, we'll join together in Mariv. And if you want to get your Siddur ready, we're on page 264 in Lev Shalem, but if you're at home using a different Siddur, we're on page 137 or 200. Just a moment.
Do you want to keep this or should I?
Straight up, Joey. All right, I invite you to rise from page 264, 137, or 200.
Want the microphone back?
Sure. You may be seated. Maviam, we live, I'm a given you live, I don't have to go to more, I am to begin local Lamba, hey, Baruch Atarun, hi, Mari, Parabin. Yavatecha, Tasimino Yogamim, Baruch Atarun, hi, Livamo Israel.
Amen.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai,
Yay.
Beratzon kiblu alehem Moshe v'Yisrael echad Yeshua V'simcha rabah v'miru kulam Mi chamocha v'Adonai mi chamocha Nidar b'kodesh Nor ha'tehillah tosifeleh Malchutecha reuvenecha b'keyam mipnei Moshe tzei anu b'yameru Adonai imach milamayim V'nehmar b'kedach v'naytefo V'gelomir chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Mishmor tzivinu voinu l'chayim al shalom yetaviyat Ulam Baruch atah Adonai Shamir bo Yisrael land. On 268. המלכות שלך היא ולא מיד תמלוך בכפו תמהנו להפך אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם בית Yel Kol Masar. Yiskadav Yiskadav Shemirabah. Yirad Yirak Yisrael Lichbah B'Tzedek Haychon V'Mevach Chayinu Kol Beit Yisrael. Agadav Izman Karivim Ruhamim.
Amen.
Yishmirabah Barak Elam U'Le'Onai. Yibarach Yishtabach Yibarach Shemaviv Nasiv Yitadar Yitzaleh Yitzalav Shemir Kudishah. Levi U'Leilam Kuber Katav Shirata. Shishbachatav Nekamata. Damiram Behama. Vimeru Amen. The whispered private Amidah begins on page 270 in Lev Shalem. If you are using a different siddur, don't forget to make inclusion in the first internal blessing of the Amidah for the end of Shabbat. If you haven't yet completed your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're on page 279 in Lev Shalem, Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkadav Yikadash Mirabah, Hadibrav Kirtigim Leif Malputei B'Chayichonu Nechonu Uchayidu Kol Beit Yisrael. Agalav Yizman Karivim Ruhamei. Yishmirabah Barak Le'Olam U'Le'Omaya Yibarach Le'Yishavah. Yitzbar V'Jamav V'Kasiv Yitadar V'Talei V'Tal Hashmei Kudishah. Le'Ri U'Le'Lam Min Kover Katav V'Shiratav. Shishbachatav V'Nekamatav Damiram Be'Yamah. Imru Amen. Be seated. We're on the second half of that page. Turn back if you're in Lev Shalem to page 216 on the second paragraph on the page. Yeta kadosh shosheti lo Yisrael v'karezeh zevei amar kadosh 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 Adonai Yisrael v'lo oretz v'kotom. Bat Yisrael ruach v'shma parai korash kadohom baruch v'b'adonai yimei Adonai Yimho le'olam va'ed. Yiftechu b'cha yudei shemecha ki lo azavta toreshecha Adonai Adonai chafetz l'ma'an tzidkoi yagdilu Torah We turn back in our Sidurim, rather forward in our Sidurim to page 280, Kaddish Shalem. Mikadav, Mikadash Merabah, Miramadi Rak, Miradimli, Momadibakay, Konabay, Yedoko Beit Israel, Agalav, Isman Karbidim, Ruamei, Yeshivim, Rakab, Barak, Yalam, Lei, Hamayad, Vikarach, Vishabak, Vipar, Vijamam, Vitnase, Vitadar, Vitalei, Vitalav, Shmiri Kudishavim, Vilukau, Virkatav, Shivata, Shushpakatav, Nekmata, Ram, Yomalim, Ruamei, Vikabal, Lord, Rundon, Paul, Israel, Kadam, Vohoni, Vishmai, Havim, Ruamei, Yishlama, Rabbi, Shamai, Bechayim, Aleinu, Ve'al Yisraelim, Ruamei, Osi Shalom, Bimramav, Huyase Shalom, Aleinu, Ve'al Yisraelim, Ruamei, Aleinu, Lishabei, Hatla, Don Hakol. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. The Mourner's Kaddish is on page 282. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבם, ויאמר דבריו פירוטי וימליך מלכותי, וחייכון ויומכון וחיי בכל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבם מברך לעולם לעמי מעיין. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא. ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו. לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, גם ירן ועלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. Okay, I'm gonna ask you to indulge me in not doing that full melody for Hine El because I want as many minutes of sleep before it's worth up playing this as I can. So here we go. Hine El Yishoti Otaf V'lo Afgan Yuzi V'zimrat Adonai Yeshua Shaftemad V'sason Yimani Yeshua L'Adonai Yeshua Mecha V'irpatecha Seva Adonai Tzvot Iman Miskavlanu Adonai Yaakov Seva Adonai Tzvot Asher Yadam Motzei Hachbach Adonai Hoshea Melkeinu B'yom Koreinu LaYehudim Hayatahara V'simcha V'sason B'char Kein Tichet Lanu Kos Yeshuot Tesa V'Shem Adonai Ekra Sabri Baruch Atah Adonai L'Melech Olam Borei B'ri HaGafen Baruch Atah Adonai L'Melech Olam Borei Minei B'Samim Baruch Atah Adonai L'Melech Olam Borei B'ri HaEish Baruch Atah Adonai L'Melech Olam Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol Ben Or L'Choshech L'Yisrael L'Amim Ben Yom HaShvi'i L'Shesh Yamei HaMaaseh Baruch Atah Adonai Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Chol Chatotinu Yimcho Zarinu V'chaseinu Yiriyah B'Kachol Le'Havot Aviv Zarinu V'chaseinu Yiriyah B'Kachol Ve'Havot Aviv Alaycha Shavua Tov Shavua Tov Shavua Tov Shavua Tov Shavua Tov Shavua Tov Shavua Tov
Imiram Yaminu, Yavo Elenu, Imashiach ben David, Imashiach ben David.
Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat tov. Thank you.
She's like far.
נסיעה טובה. Thank you. אוקיי, נשים את זה בפעם.
Just like that.
בבקשה. שבוע טוב. Let me put this away.
יאללה, תהיה דקי, יהיה טוב. יאללה, מת, אני רוצה לקרוא.
Oh, yeah. Hmm. Is that her?
No.
Leaving the room?
No.
No, it's not her? Okay, no.
No.
Okay, well, I guess we should get off then. There, okay.
It was fine. You turn it off. Bro. There you go. Leave.